sometimes these smaller weddings are even more special and more intimate than the larger weddings could have ever been.
John from PGP Wedding Films, and welcome to Say Yes to the Best, where we talk to the best wedding pros to give you wedding planning advice. Subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Instagram. We have new content out all the time to help you with your wedding planning. Today, I am talking with Caitlin of Clover Event Co. How are you doing, Caitlin?
Good. How are you, John?
Doing well. Thanks for being on the show. How are things going?
It's been a crazy year for all of us, I think, right? I think we're all in the same boat. It's been an unexpected 2020, but excited to talk about all things micro weddings today with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you wanted to talk to our audience a little bit about, how to maybe pivot if you were going to have a larger event to something that is a smaller micro wedding, but still having a fantastic, amazing wedding day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of people are torn between, they've dreamt of the larger wedding, they've planned the larger wedding, and some people now, quite frankly, after they've pivoted once, maybe even twice already, they're kind of feeling like they don't want to continue with this larger wedding when so much is uncertain. So yeah, I'd love to talk today about how couples are pivoting to something smaller and what that can look like for them.
What are some things that you've seen your clients do to kind of pivot their wedding to something smaller?
So the main question for all couples that are going through this, it's really going to start with the venue. So as rules in Pennsylvania and other, states across the country have adjusted, the biggest thing that's going to be their deciding factor whether they're going to pivot to a micro wedding is whether or not they can actually legally do a wedding in their venue on their original date. So that's where a lot of our clients are starting. If their venue, says you cannot have more than, say, 25 people inside at your venue, which is what, as of this moment, is the current, Pennsylvania regulation, then a lot of our clients are deciding to pivot to something smaller indoors or deciding to move their wedding to a private property or private home where they can have more people outdoors, but they still can't necessarily host, say, a 200-person wedding at their private home. So the first thing is really defining where this micro wedding is going to be. Is it going to be, at the original intended venue? Is it going to be at the private home? Is it going to be in a different new location? And the second part is what vendors they want to have on board still. So some of our couples, for example, are deciding that they want to have the full original wedding team. They want all the bells and whistles, where some clients are deciding that some of those vendors they've originally contracted with may no longer be the right fit for their micro wedding, and they may be able to use those services in a different way. So that's really step 2, is to look at what vendors do you have contracts with and how can they be utilized for the actual wedding day itself. And some people, as I'm sure you're hearing too, are deciding to do a micro wedding this year and then do a larger celebration next year. So some of our couples, quite frankly, it's come down to just, personal reasons, that whether they wanted to legally get married for financial reasons, personal reasons, religious reasons, whatever it might be, they've decided that they don't want to wait another year and a half or longer to legally get married, and they've chosen to just legally get married this year in a micro wedding, but they still want to have that moment this year to have it be special, but they're also going to be having the wedding next year. So that brings up an interesting point for people too, because as you know, as a vendor, when a client contracts with you, they contract with you for one specific date. So for some of our couples who are looking to do a micro wedding this year and a larger wedding next year, we're discussing with the vendors to contract for the additional date and whether we're moving this year's contract to 2021 and recontracting for this year, or whether we're keeping the current contract for this year. And, we're kind of just working through that. When it comes to budgets for these micro weddings, or how couples are moving around payments, or say a vendor like you who they may have booked initially, but they need to change that structure of the contract. Some of our couples have been looking at it like, well, we had been paying for this large wedding and we may have deposits in with vendors, but we no longer need that big wedding. And so a lot of vendors have obviously been flexible, with our couples too, in working with them and saying, okay, you put down, say a deposit for a photographer for an 8-hour day, but really you only need a 4-hour day right now. Well, they're taking that deposit and putting it towards that smaller event. So a lot of our couples are working with them. So even if you had, say, for example, originally budgeted for a large $75,000 wedding with 150 people, and now you're doing a 50-person wedding in the backyard, your budget can come down too if your vendors are willing to work with you on the deposits you've paid and everything to ensure that everything is scaling back accordingly for that. So same with the florist, you may have had a florist proposal that was $10,000 because it was going to be all these tables and all these arrangements, but now you can take the deposit you gave them and scale that down to something smaller. So for some of our couples, it's also coming down to financial choice. Their jobs may have been affected by COVID. Their personal finances may have been affected by COVID. Their family finances may have been affected. And they no longer think they have the finances to put into that larger wedding. And so being able to scale that back is not only helping them mentally and emotionally, but for some of them financially as well, which is nice.
I mean, I've said it many times. One of the, I think, things that I've enjoyed seeing through all this is when vendors like us are kind of understanding where couples are coming from and kind of meeting them halfway, because we have to appreciate that this is not how they drew up their once in a lifetime event. And I've really enjoyed the stories of when I've seen people kind of go above and beyond and really make the most of it for couples.
And that's really what it comes down to. And I think, one thing I've been loving people talking about the industry is that, listen, as you know, this is our careers, this is our lifestyles, this is how we make a living. It's not, it's a profession to us. But at the end of the day, we didn't get in this profession to make money. We got into it because we love what we do. We love the couples we work with. We love love. We love all those things, right? So, most of us are not making millions on this, so we're doing it because we love it and we want to do it for our couples. And so we're also seeing that. We're seeing vendors throw additional things in, put additional time into the micro weddings, do all these extra things for their couples because they truly care and they want them to have a good experience. And that's definitely something that I'm seeing as well, which has been really great.
So what are some aspects of the wedding that you think really kind of translates well from a larger venue, a larger wedding to something smaller?
Sure. And this really goes into a personal decision by the couple too. I think some couples, want to, in that micro wedding, still have items that are what would be considered traditional wedding elements. So for example, walking down an aisle with, their family members and meeting their partner at the end of that aisle, doing a first look, having a first dance perhaps. Whereas some couples are letting go of some of those traditions and letting it be a more casual affair. So I think the first step is knowing how traditional you want that micro wedding to be. But really, honestly, everything from a larger wedding can be completely pared down. So when we're talking about, each vendor that's involved, obviously, the venue is going to be a big indicator. But when we're talking about, photographers and videographers like yourself, they can still be present at a micro wedding. The one thing we're doing with a lot of them, though, is paring down their hours of coverage. So whereas a traditional photographer or videographer like yourself might be on site from anywhere to 8 to 10 hours or more on a typical wedding day, we may need them only on site for, say, 5 to 6 hours or even less for a micro wedding, depending on what kind of coverage the client wants. But when it comes to even things like florals, then we still are doing personal florals, ceremony florals, reception florals. We're just paring all of that down. And for a lot of couples, maybe they're doing just personal flowers for, say, the two partners involved in the wedding, but not for parents and wedding party and all those people. And when it comes to, say, reception florals, from going from 20 tables for their 200 guest count down to, say, 6 tables or so for their 60-person guest count, we're still taking the same design inspiration, the same vision, the same visuals. We're just paring everything down to a smaller scale. You're still going to have all the elements and details that make it a wedding. You can still have a wedding cake. You can still have, champagne toast. You can still have first dances. You can still have all of those elements. They just might look a little bit different. So, I think some couples are also deciding that, pivoting down to something smaller is also a chance to maybe break away from tradition a little bit and do something a little bit more fun. So we're also having couples who are deciding that now's the time to, add a little more color to their palette that they didn't want to do originally at maybe their more formal venue, or now's the time to have more playful signage and visuals to the event that maybe they weren't going to do before. We've had clients that were, originally going to have a church ceremony that now are doing a backyard ceremony. So that's completely changing, for them, the way that this wedding looks. So that's a big part of it too. It does offer a little bit more flexibility.
From what you've seen with your couples that have made this pivot, how does it kind of change the experience of the wedding day?
I think we always at Clover, before even COVID hit, we were somewhat known in the Philadelphia region for doing a lot of smaller weddings. We've done a lot of restaurant weddings at places like Osteria, Mulheron's, La Colombe, these intimate, Barbuzzo upstairs is one of our favorites too. So we had done previously a lot of weddings for under 100 guests. And not that I don't love our big weddings, but I secretly always thought our smaller ones were the most intimate and the best guest experience. And those weddings were the weddings that guests came up to us and said, this was the best wedding I've ever been to. This was the most magical and intimate wedding I've ever been to. So I think what we want to, instill in couples is to know that sometimes these smaller weddings are even more special and more intimate than the larger weddings could have ever been. So it really creates this intimacy that you can't get with a big wedding. So by having just your core group of people there, you're obviously spending more time with the people that you want to be spending time with. And it just really allows them all to be together in that space. And yeah, I just think they're magical. I think it also, the funny thing that comes up, I think, in these micro weddings is that with a smaller guest count, everybody's just more flexible. It's your intimate group of people. It kind of takes the pressure off the couple, I think, for this day. As you know, too, I hate to say it sometimes, but no wedding day is perfect. Something always happens. Something small, something funny, something silly. Something happens that we as wedding planners have to jump in and help solve, and you're often there with us too, trying to help solve it. And so that's okay. That happens on normal wedding day. But I think couples put a lot of pressure on themselves with that larger wedding to ensure that nothing goes wrong. And if anything does go wrong, there's a lot of stress and anxiety built into that. Whereas with the micro wedding, because it's really their core group of people and they're less concerned about putting on, this larger wedding, all of that stress and anxiety goes away and everything just happens more naturally. And when things go wrong like that, guests are more willing to roll with the punches and just have it be something that they all look back and laugh on too. So that's one thing that I think happens at an intimate wedding that just can never happen at those larger weddings too.
So if a couple is in the position where they've decided, okay, I have to change my wedding, they don't really necessarily know what to do, how to start. It's just, a very big 180 for them. What would be your suggestion as maybe like the first steps to get the ball rolling?
I think what we've talked to a lot of couples about is in the very beginning when they think they want to do this is figuring out what scale they want to do it at. Do they want to do something that feels like a full-on wedding, just pared back down, or do they want to do something smaller and more intimate that's really casual and save some of those larger elements for their larger wedding potentially the next year?
What would be the best way for a couple to maybe inform their guests of any sort of change in just the way, maybe not just logistics as far as, it's in a new place, but just maybe the tone of the wedding is going to be different?
So yeah, I think that's a big question we've been getting asked a lot too, is also, what if I was originally inviting 200 people to my wedding and now we need to uninvite people? So how do you uninvite people to your wedding? And so a lot of our couples, for the sake of time right now, are sending a lot of paperless post updates to people just because things are changing so quickly, though we're certainly doing a lot of printed invitations as well. But for ones that are sending, say, via paperless post or somewhere else, writing an email to guests saying, for those that need to uninvite, saying that you will be celebrating with your immediate family, siblings, whoever you're going to have there, and that you hope to celebrate with them at a later date, like have them stay tuned, is a great way to sort of tell them, hey, we are moving forward with this event. So if you see photos or videos from this occasion, this is what we're doing and it's going to be with our immediate families and we wish you could all be there, but we hope we can celebrate later, is a great way to lay that out. And then secondly, for those that you are inviting to the micro wedding, I think it's really important that they also know who's going to be there and how intimate it's going to be, and also any rules or guidelines you are going to be following as far as, COVID precautions. So I think what we're getting a lot of questions about too is guests wanting to know what they're showing up to. So are they showing up to a micro wedding where everybody is going to be required to wear masks and sanitize? Are they required to social distance? Are the guests going to be asked to, do any different things that they should be aware of in advance? Are masks going to be provided? Are they not provided? What does that look like? So we do find that it works really well if you can communicate to guests in advance what they can expect, so nobody's showing up uncomfortable. This is a time of so much uncertainty, so much anxiety for a lot of people, which we completely understand. So if you are going to be having a wedding and you want guests to come, they need to know what the expectation is and what they can expect when they get there so they feel comfortable attending. So I think that's really important too, to be as clear as you can with them on what guidelines will be in place.
For you as a planner, what I guess are you most excited for as far as kind of this forced shift to smaller, more intimate weddings?
Absolutely. I think for us, going back to what we were saying too, with the intimate weddings just tend to be very personal and they tend to bring out, I think, the rawest emotions in our couples. And so I think what I've loved, not that I don't want my couples to have the dream wedding they've always dreamed about, but I think what I'm loving seeing some of them do is get back to what is really important to them here. And it's that they just want to marry their partner. They just want to get married. They don't want to have to stress over this anymore. They don't want to have to worry about the uncertainty and the changing regulations. And so that's bringing them back to a place where they're just excited to marry their spouse in whatever way they can do it. And part of this also means that there's a lot more surprises for them. There's a lot more things we can throw in for them that are fun. We had a couple we did a micro wedding for in June where we had a whole surprise parade they didn't know about. We did this whole backdrop for them to sit in a lounge with balloons and all these things that they didn't even know about. So what I kept telling the couple was that this is an experience that they would have never, and a memory they would have never even had if COVID hadn't happened. And they are postponing their wedding into 2021, the larger celebration. But this whole event that we had this June would have never even happened. And so it was a whole magical day for them that they didn't even really know what was going to come of it. And so in that moment, all they kept saying was like, wow, we didn't even expect this. We didn't know this was happening. We didn't, and it just became this moment where it was a whole surprise for them of this magical day. And afterwards, they said the same thing. They said, we didn't even know it was going to be as magical as it was.
I think obviously we'd all, if we could go into a time machine and make none of the last few months happen, we would. But I think it's really important to try to find those silver linings and the good within the bad, and just trying to make the most of it. And, a wedding is typically a once in a lifetime thing. So, I think however you decide to do something in the short term, it's going to be special to you no matter what. And it's great to see people kind of embracing that.
Yeah. And I think the other part is, like I said, some of our couples have chosen to do a micro wedding this year and have then moved the larger wedding to 2021. But some couples have just decided, hey, we've postponed twice now. They might be into their 30s and want to move on with their life, grow a family, buy a home, whatever it might be. And for lack of a better word, they don't want to keep going through this. They're done. They want to just have the wedding, and that's what's most important to them. So we're able to take, what they had originally planned and restructure it a little bit. But those couples who are willing to let go of the initial vision we're creating really magical days for them because they're very flexible. And at this point, because they've already postponed twice, they're very comfortable with us just sort of taking the lead on this design and moving their wedding in a whole new direction that they never even knew. And I think they're loving it in the end. They're loving that they were able to celebrate, and it was all that they needed. I think that is what a lot of couples are coming back to too, is that they thought they wanted these things. They thought they wanted to have, this experience. And now they realize that what they need is really much less than that. And that's really what's most important to them.
Caitlin, thank you so much for all your insight and being a part of the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, John. I really appreciate it.
It's Caitlin from Clover Event Co. All of their information is going to be below. So find them on Instagram, online. They're a great planner in the Philadelphia area, and they go all over. And thank you for watching Say Yes to the Best. Subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Instagram. Again, we have new content out all the time to help you navigate your wedding plan. Thanks, and happy planning.
I, Kevin, take you, Christine, to be my wife. I promise to be faithful to you in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, to love you and honor you all the days of my life.
I, Christine, take you, Kevin, to be my husband. I promise to be faithful to you in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, to love you and honor you all the days of my life.